Hey everyone, welcome back to Pop Incursions. I'm Nico and today we are going to rock through and break down episode 4 of Agatha All Along. If I can't reach you, let my song teach you. Yes, we are going to discuss that moment towards the end of the episode, and we have a major Rio Vidal theory. Stay tuned.
Heard you guys were having a party.
What's up? Hey, what? Avengers! Sorry, what?
And I will return for judgment.
May I next meet you,
Avengers!
Confusion is but the first step on the journey to knowledge.
Show some respect.
She-Hulk smash.
It's Shang-Chi.
Higher, further, faster.
You need to back off.
So this week's episode of Agatha All Along is now out on Disney Plus, and I really loved this episode. Definitely is one of my favorites so far, and I am just loving the show so much, and it's performing quite well in the fandom. This week the coven had to face Sharon's death, aka Mrs. Hart, and summoned a green witch to replace her, and surprise surprise, it was Rio Vidal who answered their call because she was in the neighborhood. So I want to discuss exactly what she means by that. This was also the fire trial, so Alice's trial, and we got to hear the amazing rock version of the Ballad of the Witch's Road by Lorna Wu, Alice's mother. The coven also opened up a lot more, and we got a lot more information about Agatha and Rio's past relationship. Yes, sapphic witches in the MCU. So episode 4 is titled If I Can't Reach You, Let My Song Teach You, and like the other episodes, it's a line from the Ballad of the Witch's Road, but it's not a line from the traditional ballad, or also known as the sacred chant. It's actually from the rock version.
If I can't reach you, let my song teach you.
Which is by Lorna Wu, Alice's mother, and the line is pretty self-explanatory and pretty direct and literal, because in this episode Lorna cannot be there physically with Alice, so instead the song teaches Alice. Episode 3 ended with the death of Sharon, aka Mrs. Hart, and this episode begins with Agatha looking down at Sharon's corpse, and she says out loud, "I didn't think you had it in you." And meanwhile, Teen is digging a grave for Sharon's body and asks Agatha, "What exactly do you mean?" And Agatha just winks at Teen, and Teen actually scoffs, so it seems like his patience and tolerance for Agatha is definitely starting to thin, possibly related to what Jennifer told Teen in the last episode.
Did you know she traded her own child for the Book of the Damned?
About trading her son for the Darkhold, and possible connections there with Mephisto. Take note that the leaves on the Witch's Road have now changed colour. They were a teal blue, which was to represent the water trial, i.e. Jennifer as the potions witch. A potion is like a liquid, i.e. water, whereas now they are yellow and orange, representing the fire trial, i.e. Alice, who is the fire witch, and this is her trial. Agatha says,
Of course the road killed her. More power for the rest of us.
which reminds us of the Agatha we met in WandaVision and who she really is. Alice then asks Agatha how many witches left the road with you last time, and Agatha takes a moment to come up with the answer and says 1, meaning of the people that survived the Witch's Road, it was only her and one other witch. And I really hope this isn't foreboding of this attempt at the Witch's Road with this coven. However, it's almost certain at this point that Agatha in fact did not walk the Witch's Road before, because she has a clear lack of knowledge of what to do and how it works, and this is likely just more of Agatha's skullduggery to come off as more of a badass. Agatha finally agrees to get a replacement green witch, so they cast a spell or an incantation. We see an outline of a body, and last week I imagined this was where Sharon's body was buried, but instead it's actually a representation of the witch that they want to summon. As they make their wishes, so to speak, and place their wishes within this outline, it's quite literally a physical manifestation of the type of witch they want. A big shout out to Justinus at Mad Latinus on X for translating the Latin in this incantation. The spell goes,
Advocamus sororem viridem.
Advocamus sororem viridum. We summon a green sister.
Supra, infra, intra, extra.
Supra, infra, intra, extra, above, below, within, without.
Esse viridis non est facile.
Esse viridis non est facile. It's not easy being green. We can also see that everyone must participate when casting this spell, even teen, and even without any powers, Agatha is still capable of leading the coven in casting this incantation, linking back to teen's reference to analog magic.
There's always analog magic. You know, labor-intensive, manual act of magic.
I also love that the last line is an Easter egg in reference to Kermit the Frog.
It's not easy being green.
And the fact that they went to the trouble of even making the Latin spells have humour and Easter eggs tells you everything you need to know about the fantastic creators behind Agatha All Along. Kevin Feige, please give Jack Schaefer the keys to the magical and supernatural corner of the MCU. Be sure to check out Justinus on X at Mad Latinist. We are so lucky to have someone in the fandom that is happy to translate the Latin in the spells, which makes us all much more connected and makes us able to understand and appreciate the show that much more. While they expected it to take much longer for the witch to arrive, out of nowhere something bursts out of Sharon's grave, scaring the life out of all of them, and just like Wanda in Multiverse of Madness, this disjointed witch emerges. And Teen shouts out, "Mrs. Hart, is that you?" as if she's resurrected from the dead. And Alice and Lilia panic and try and go through Teen's spellbook for a protection spell, but lo and behold, or should I say green and gold, it's Rio. What a surprise. And can we just take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship that has gone into Rio's outfit? It truly is a work of art and such a modern take for such an ancient green witch. It just works so well, and she is Brat, or as Aubrey Plaza wants us to say, she is witch. After Brat summer, it's witch fall. Agatha says,
How did you?
I was in the neighborhood.
which is very interesting, and we will touch on that in a second. Agatha is certainly not happy about this, and the coven even have to hold her back. And I think this is because Rio has a lot more to do with this little coincidence than we think. There has been a lot of hints and nods to a potential theory about Rio, but to prevent any possible spoilers, I will wait towards the end of the video to discuss it. Alice asks Rio, "Oh, so you're a green witch?" And Rio, in this demonic-like voice, says,
Less a green witch, more the green witch.
possibly suggesting who she could be, and possibly suggesting she could be like the first ever Green Witch. Initially, Alice does not want to do the trial because she recognises the house that's appearing to them, and she knows that it's her trial. Just like the last trial, the door to the house features the phases of the moon, and this time it's the waxing phase, also known as the fire phase of the moon, indicating that it's Alice's challenge because she is the fire witch. Just like in the previous trial, it featured the water phase of the moon because it was Jennifer's challenge, i.e. Potions, the water witch. Note that the moon in the Witch's Road resembles the same phase as the one on the door to the house, and it seems that the standard being for the moon on the Witch's Road is a full moon, except when there's a trial underway, which then it changes to match the one of the trial. As they enter, Alice says,
"Don't drink anything, don't eat anything, don't touch anything."
A reference to the last trial, because in the last trial they drank the wine so willingly, not knowing it was part of the trial. Just like in the last trial, their aesthetics and clothes changed to match the theme of this trial, which is in a 70s theme, and they all look great. I mean, teen with long hair, Jen as flower child, Lilia giving us a nod to Liza Minnelli. I love Alice's look, especially the glasses. Agatha looks flawless flawless, and Rio is just wow. Like, that outfit is gorgeous. And take note, there is a hood. Just like in episode 1, when we met Rio, she was wearing a hood. They all scour the house to find anything that may indicate what the trial is, similar to the invitation last time. As they search the house, Lilia looks at murals on the wall, each of which depicts different ways that witches were killed, tortured, or persecuted throughout history. The first one depicts a witch in a hanging cage. Now, not a cage where they were hanged, but a cage that actually hangs from the ceiling, similar to the cages in the Sanderson sisters' homes in Hocus Pocus. The second mural features a witch that is in stocks and is essentially in what you could call a large cauldron with a fire lit underneath as she is essentially boiled. The third one is a witch being burned at the stake. The fourth depicts a witch being hung from her wrists, similar to another torture method also known as strappado or corda, where the person's hands are tied behind their back and suspended from a rope attached to their body to increase the effect and the pain. As Lilia looks at this mural, we can actually hear a woman's screams in the background very quietly, and this mural in particular seems to trigger Lilia and makes her emotional. The fifth and final mural is a witch in a ducking stool, or also known as a cooking stool, a torture method used in medieval times in Europe against witches. The ducking stool came from the action of using the contraption of ducking the witch into a body of water. It's important to note that being 450 years old approximately, this would put Lilia's birth around the year 1576, and Lilia is from Sicily in Italy. Consequently, this puts her childhood in rearing during what was the most extensive period for witch trials in Europe, where between 1560 and 1670, more than 40,000 deaths occurred of those accused of being a witch or practicing witchcraft. This would mean that Lilia grew up during a very tumultuous period in history for witches, where likely many people Lilia knew, even her own family or coven, were likely persecuted for being witches. This may elaborate on the traumatic hallucination Lilia experienced in the previous episode and her emotions in this one. Perhaps that could have been the reason that her maestra or teacher, who we met last episode, had died. Of course, I'm biased because I'm European, but I really hope we get to revisit some of those periods in history when Lilia was in Europe, just like we were able to see Agatha's witch trial in Salem in WandaVision, because I've always said the MCU does revisiting history so well, and I do hope we also get to revisit the Salem era as well. Jen sees these demonic devil-like masks resembling that of a Japanese Namehage mask, which are meant to resemble demonic-like beings, aka Oni, from Japanese folklore. I have thought of a number of possible references and meanings of the presence of these masks, including referencing Mephisto again, referencing the cursed demon that we see later in the episode. The masks on the wall also remind me of the mounted trophies on the wall of the Bloodstone Manor in Werewolf by Night. What's really spine-chilling is that if you look at one of these masks, there are actually eyes that move. Alice sees a photo of her mother Lorna, and while speaking with Lilia, we learn that Lorna's concerts were her attempt at opening the path to the Witch's Road, and that her fans were meant to resemble her coven. What I'm seeing in this series is a huge spotlight placed on covenless witches, which actually seem quite common. Lilia seems to have another vision of the future.
Which is it? Am I wispy or am I kooky? Alice, don't.
And since walking the road, these visions do not sound overly hopeful. Rio and Agatha talk in the recording booth, and Agatha says, "You're too early." And Rio says, "It wasn't up to me. Magic, as it does, took the path of least resistance."
Carried the closest, most appropriate candidate down. Or up.
Agatha then baits Rio and turns on the microphone so the coven can hear Rio as she says, "I get the pleasure of watching you
Kill all the witches around you. You get your power, and I get my buddies."
I think that's a huge hint as to who she possibly is, but as I said, we'll get into this deeper at the end of the video. Agatha very sarcastically says,
Hey, that's my coven you're you're talking about. I'm not that kind of witch anymore.
I mean, the sarcasm speaks for itself. Teen puts on a track which plays backwards, also known as backmasking, and a demonic voice curses them all. This sets off the metronome. Alice says that she feels lighter, signifying that the coven is now sharing the burden of the curse, whereas up until now, Alice has always carried that burden all by herself. Suddenly, Lilia falls to the floor, writhing with smoke coming from her, and Alice uses Rio's dagger to draw a circle around them and chant in Latin. This works, but then Jen also has one of these moments, and we can see on Jen's shoulders a really bad burn, and lo and behold, Lilia has them too. We can actually hear the curse moving around the house, and we get a POV shot. This point of view camera angle of the curse is a throwback to The Evil Dead, directed by the legendary Sam Raimi, who obviously directed the very good, as I must say, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and who will likely return to direct some more horror-like films such as the next Doctor Strange, hopefully in the MCU. Alice checks the broken record, and it's her mother's discography titled Lorna Wu and the Coral Shore, which features many Easter eggs because the tracks are titled Mary Mary, which I honestly have no idea what could be referring to unless it refers to one of the show's producers, Mary Lavanos, who also worked on WandaVision, Captain Marvel and The Marvels. Another track titled Red Haired Woman, what I'm going to assume is maybe a song about the prophecy of the Scarlet Witch. I would love to hear that one day, maybe in her solo film, but I do think that the Lopez's would have to come back to create it. The other songs include Cinnamon and Sage, common spices used in witchcraft, often for protection and lifting negativity. Flick of the wrist, representing the physical hand movements of witches, which we have seen throughout time, especially in the MCU. And Swan Song, which would be very telling if this really is her last song, providing a big bang to her exit and maybe some final words and a goodbye to her daughter. We also see that Alice also had these scars or markings on her shoulders, and Alice reveals her mother had them too, but Alice says that she was in denial and had convinced herself they were just birthmarks. Out of nowhere, a gust of wind pushes Teen across the room, smashing the glass of the recording booth. Teen says,
Got attacked by the curse. I mean, I'm part of the coven.
And while this could be the case, I have also contemplated, could this actually be Rio wanting to collect one of her bodies? Because we've seen Rio use the force of wind before to attack Agatha. They deduce that the only way to protect themselves and free themselves from the curse is to play Lorna's rock version of the ballad. Rio is able to reveal that Lorna's true intention on the Witch's Road was
To save her daughter.
almost as if she can speak to the dead or would know someone's, dying wish. Alice resists, but they work out that Lorna's version of the ballad is actually a protection spell. Very telling.
You should have burnt to a crisp years ago, but here you are. That's because at any given moment, somewhere, someone is playing that song that you hate so much.
I've also seen others try to suggest that the Sokovian lullaby that Wanda sang to the twins could also be a protection spell, while when translated it's more about love, but that may work too, and perhaps that is the origin of Teen's sigil. They all assume a position to play. Interestingly, Lilia says she plays the zills, small metallic symbols which date back to 500 BC, and being 450 years old, you would know of such instruments.
Well, what do you know? Zills.
This version of the ballad is so cool. I'm already listening to both on my phone.
Down, down, down the road, down the witch's.
And let's get this one into the charts like we got the Sacred Chant one into the charts. The lyrics make clear connections and references to Alice.
If I can hold you, remember what I told you.
And just like the title of the episode says, while Lorna cannot reach Alice, she's able to teach her through the song. If I can't reach you, let my song teach you. As they play and sing the ballad, the house starts catching on fire. Clearly, the curse is not happy that they're singing the ballad.
He's angry.
The curse then reveals itself, and it's one scary When it screams, it reminds me of a type of bird. I can't think of what though. And it has webbed hands which make up wings and webbed feet with a very unpleasant aesthetic. I don't want to assume, but some features may suggest that this demon is female. Alice then says,
I can see it. I can kill it.
and she continues singing and playing the ballad with passion. The curse then goes back into an invisible-like mode and flies across the room to Alice, but we can see in its outline what looks to be the same type of fire magic that we've seen Alice wielding in promos, which looks to be the next episode. The curse lands on Alice's shoulders, and as they finish the ballad, the curse is incinerated. They face the curse, and they're all free, and Alice is finally free. The piano lid lifts up as they exit, but Teen collapses. They carry Teen out back to the Witch's Road, and Agatha is very upset and distraught, and she looks for solutions.
What else can we do? What else can we do?
Lilia says he's young, he's strong, and Agatha says don't, because people often say those types of things when there's a doubt over the person's survival. When Agatha was asking Jen what she needs to save Teen, Lilia says,
Jen, what do you need, Jen? What do you need? Three of Swords.
which in tarot represent heartbreak, grief, sorrow, and emotional pain, which I believe she's picking up from Agatha, who's closest to her. Of course, in this moment, Agatha is distraught, and these emotions would likely connect to the loss of her son, Nicholas, owing to the fact that at this point, Agatha may think Teen is her son. As of this, those feelings around losing him and the grief that came are resurfacing, as she is not only beside herself and concerned for Teen's life, but to Agatha, it may feel like she's about to lose her son all over again. I suspect that this will allow Lilia to get to know Agatha better and to understand why Agatha brought this boy along. Meanwhile, Rio is looking like a salivating hyena, and Agatha just looks at her and goes,
Don't.
stick around till the end of the video. Agatha asks Jen what she needs, and using moonlight and water and chanting,
Wolnus, Abaqua, Curare.
they are able to heal him, and they move Teen elsewhere on the road to make him more comfortable. Agatha sits with Teen as he recovers and heals, while the rest of the coven sit around a fire opening up to one another. Agatha's choice to sit here with Teen, looking over him, shows us that maternal, protective side to Agatha. Jen shares that she's not just a witch.
I'm an 11th generation root worker and midway.
Root work is an African-American form of alchemy which includes herbalism, mediumship, and divination. Notably for Jennifer, the herbalism, which is her specialty, is the use of plants, roots, grass, and weeds for therapeutic remedies. Root work is not a religion, but rather inherited through birth line, and every family has a healer in them. This is an ancestral-based practice. This information and definition comes from AFRAM, African American News. When asked how she was bound, Jennifer shares that she was invited to the Obstetric Association of Greater Boston to share her expertise, but really
It was a trap. I still don't know how he did it. Bound me without magic.
and seemingly it was a doctor who bound her. Jennifer says, so much for do no harm, confirming he is a doctor or healthcare professional, because despite the oath to do no harm, he did do harm to Jennifer. I'm going to assume that this is the same doctor from last week that tried to drown her. Alice shares that when her mother died,
I stopped believing everything she ever taught me.
she was so angry, and she said a small part of her hoped the road wasn't real, because if it was, which it is now,
Because now you know it was all for you.
Jen hands Alice some sort of natural paste and says apply it to your pressure points, again displaying her skills in her root work and alchemy. Lilia shares what she thinks is the worst part of being a witch,
All the misconceptions and rumor mongering.
that they talk to goats, that they have a third nipple, which I've never heard of before, but hey. And this lines up with what she has said in the last two episodes around those myths and stereotypes of witches. In episode 2, she named Agatha as the type of witch that makes people believe that.
Witches like you are the reason people think we steal children and eat babies.
And in the last episode, she didn't like when Sharon, aka Mrs. Hart, synonymized witches with just bad girls.
Do you see any pointy hats in here? Any green skin?
Referring back to Lilia's long life and everything she has been through, let's not forget when she said,
I was chased out of every village I passed through for accurately predicting tragedy.
So I think that in Lilia's trial, she will have to face these misconceptions that have hurt her so much over the years. And this does look to be the case, as we've seen in promos, a trial where Lilia is dressed as Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz, Agatha as the Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz, and Jane as the witch or old hag Grimhilda from Snow White. When Teen wakes, he asks Agatha if she put the sigil on him, and she says no, but we wouldn't actually know anyway because
The sigil works on the witch who cast it as well. That's why we don't use them as much. They're super irritating.
Agatha says, before you ask how to lift a sigil in that curious little voice of yours, they're not lifted. Sigils are destroyed, and only when they're no longer needed. But, as I said last week, I think that he knows a lot more than he's pretending. And there's two options. He either knows what a sigil is, someone else placed it, and obviously he can't say it. Or, and I think this may be somewhat possible, he actually placed the sigil on himself because he did not want them knowing his identity until he got to the end of the road to get powers. Kind of insinuating that there may be a fight or conflict, because why would he have to wait till he got powers to tell at least Agatha who he is? Agatha says to Teen,
You don't have to know a person's name to know who they are.
oh God, I am not ready for when Agatha learns he is not her son. And on top of whatever that reaction is going to look like, if he actually turns out to be Billy Kaplan, Wanda's son, she's going to be pissed. And as much as I know she will be sad, I fear she will only display her anger. I'm worried that someone may lose their newly procured powers, or there may be grave consequences. Teen asks Agatha what really happened to her son, but she's not interested in discussing it. Around the fire, the coven are sharing their battle wounds, and Lilia shows us a scar from a vampire bite.
Vampire bite. Right before I knocked out his other two. Oh.
This is a pretty interesting reveal that they're even discussing other beings in that magical and supernatural corner of the MCU. Could it have been Blade? Could it have been Saracen from She-Hulk? It's long overdue that we start to see the supernatural side of the MCU and to see that actually start to cross over. Agatha sits down next to Rio and holds the flower that Rio gave her when Rio first arrived. And the coven ask Agatha, what are your battle scars? And she shows us the scar on her elbow. Knitting needle to the elbow.
You ever hear of the Daughters of Liberty? Exactly.
But she must have finished them off. And the Daughters of Liberty do come from the comics. Rio says,
I've got a scar. No, you don't.
Implying that Agatha must have gotten up close to Rio's body to be able to know that so quickly. And Rio says, a long time ago, I loved someone. And I had to do something that I didn't want to do.
Even though it was my job. And it hurt them. She is my scar.
So this really insinuates that not only, of course, Rio and Agatha have been in a relationship, but Rio was involved with what happened to Agatha's son, Nicholas Scratch. And we will discuss this in our Rio theory at the end of the video, but this highly suggests who she could be. And this episode is full of those hints. Agatha goes to stretch her legs and Rio follows, but before she leaves, Lilia grabs Rio by the arm and says,
Don't think for a second I've forgotten what you said in the sound booth.
Obviously referring back to when Agatha did a little hot mic moment when Rio said,
You get your power and I get my buddies.
Agatha and Rio hug one another, both likely feeling sad about what happened between them all that time ago, and they almost kiss. Almost, but Rio says to Agatha,
That boy isn't yours.
Almost as if Rio would know if someone was dead or alive. Because Rio says this, Agatha doesn't want to kiss her anymore. And I'm sure we will get a kiss by the end of the show. But this 1000% has to confirm they had a past romantic relationship. And I can actually respect Rio for doing this because clearly Agatha must have thought, oh, Rio brought back my son, be it from the dead, from Mephisto, whatever, that has, you know, TBD. But that may have prompted why Agatha was willing to re-engage in their relationship. But Rio was like, no, I don't want you to be under any false pretenses, and I don't want to do this if you think I've done something nice that I haven't done. And of course, because she says this, Agatha no longer wants to kiss, and she smiles and walks off. And I don't get this smile. Like, is she about to do something, or like, this is really like, what the hell? Why are you smiling? Clearly, Agatha thought Teen was her son, Nicholas Scratch. And that concludes episode 4, If I Can't Reach You, Let My Song Teach You. What an episode. Has to be one of my favourites and one of the best so far. It was just top tier. The trial was obviously took less time than the last, but we got way more time on the road and them sharing about themselves, and we've learned a lot, and it really helped with the show. And I have to say, for a show that, you know, for the bulk of the episodes in the middle have a very procedural format where they do a trial, they do very well at making it feel different and keeping the pace quite fast, so it doesn't feel like while we do these trials we're not learning anything. No, we're learning loads every time they do a trial. A prevalent theory has emerged, and spoiler warning because it may come to be true, so you have been warned. One theory is that Rio is Death, the physical embodiment of Death, who in the comics also had a romantic relationship with Thanos and was involved with his quest for the Infinity Stones. Furthermore, Rio physically emerged up from Sharon's grave and then says to Agatha, I was in the neighbourhood. This, combined with Agatha's reaction, tells me one or two things. One, that Rio killed Sharon so she could be with Agatha on the road, or number 2, which is probably most likely because we know what happened to Sharon, but number 2 is that she was in the neighbourhood because she was collecting Sharon's body or soul because she had just died. Rio says magic, as it does, took the path of least resistance and ferried
the closest, most appropriate candidate down. Or up.
She comes up and not down, because if we remember, the door to the road appeared in Agatha's basement and it was a further level down, whereas Rio came up from Sharon's grave. Now, coming down would imply from the surface world. Coming up, though, would imply from some other plane that may be below the surface world. Maybe a really hot, fiery plane where a certain red guy kind of runs the place. So maybe she was coming from hell, because after all, she is Death. Maybe Mephisto was down there with her. Above all, the most telling moment from this episode with our theory is when Teen was injured and Agatha was distraught, looked at Rio and said, don't, pleading Death not to take him.
Don't.
And meanwhile, Rio, on the other hand, is looking at Teen like a salivating hyena, contemplating and fighting the urge not to take him because he's just there. So this episode has massively hinted at this theory, and even if we didn't know this, it would want us to start thinking about Rio in terms of death and evil and all of that. So I wonder how much longer can we go without spoiling it, because if things keep revealing the way they do in 2 episodes, you know, we're just going to have to say, well, Rio is Death because it's so obvious, you know, and maybe we don't know when it gets revealed. That's the other thing.
You're too early.
Personally, I love that the physical embodiment of Death is a green witch, because it just makes so much sense. We are born to the earth, and when we die, we return to the earth, which is such a fundamental concept around death and living things. Combined with the fact that Rio is a woman, it signifies the maternity of nature, as women being not only the people to bring us into the world, but now with Rio, the ones who bring us out of it. Could argue as well that Rio is the physical embodiment of Mother Nature, because death is such a crucial part of the natural world. Not only that, but it makes death such a natural process in the MCU. I also think that it not only translates as a green witch is death, but death is a green witch, because it empowers the natural world. I'm not sure if this is going to be the case, but it would be genius if Rio's appearance changed depending what capacity she is acting in. So if she's just being a green witch like we see now on the Witch's Road, she just appears as a green witch. But if she is collecting bodies and taking lives, then she appears as the hooded skeletal figure with her dagger, which is why I've been emphasizing the repetition of hooded outfits for Rio in Agatha All Along. So what did you think of episode 4? How did you find the trial? Did you learn anything about the coven that you really liked learning about in this episode? Do you have any fun and intriguing theories you'd like to share? And what did you think of the horror aspects in this episode? I thought that cursed demon was scary as you know what, and the fact that it was practical and you could see it and it looked real. I remember saying to my husband, some of this looks better than what you get with CGI nowadays, so bravo. Be sure to leave a comment down below letting us know your thoughts and theories. Be sure to check out my socials, the links are in the description, as well as the link to my TikTok where I try to post about Agatha All Along. And I'd really appreciate it if you could give the video a like and click that subscribe button. I'm Nico from Pop Incursions, see you next time.